Alright, all you glorious gamers out there, welcome to the PlayersToo Podcast, the video game podcast for gamers like you, by gamers like you. You can find PlayersToo on all the social media, that's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at playerstoo.com, that's PLAYERSTOO.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, that really helps us out. It does a huge amount for the exposure of the show. And while you're over there, if you could give us a little review as well, again, that just helps us out even more and you would be an absolute legend to us. Alright, and on with the show. My name is Mark Henderson. With me, as always, Mr. Lewis Camley. How's it going, Lewis?
It's going very well, Mark. Good to see you as ever. How's things?
Not bad, Lewis. You've already been to the pub and now we're doing a recording. How are you feeling about that?
Can't give the secrets away. This is the special sauce. I had a colleague's leaving bash tonight, so I've had just, I think, 2 pints. I think we're grand. Fair
enough. You've been out enjoying yourself, having a jolly, and I've been sitting here doing the bloody notes.
We that far.
Anyway, Lewis, on to video games. What have you been playing this week?
Well, Mark, I've just been continuing my journey through Yharnam in Bloodborne, haven't I? And
yes!
It is absolutely astonishing and incredibly good so far.
Are you actually really enjoying it?
Yeah, I'm totally enjoying it.
Yes.
I was thinking of doing some gag there to make you think that I wasn't. No, it is fantastic. I'm not super far in. I've not had tons and tons of time to play it this week. And obviously, the nature of the game is that you get stuck in certain parts quite a lot, particularly near the beginning. But I've made progress. I'm further than I've ever got before. Anyone who was listening last week might remember that I was saying that I've kind of played the opening section a few times in the past, just essentially from false starts at trying the game, including years ago when we first played it together. I'm now past that. I've beaten the first 2 bosses. I'm into the kind of, I think from everything I can gather from things I've read and things you've said and things other people have said to me, like the bit I'm in now is where the game starts to open up in quite a big way. I get the feeling that I've got 3 potential options of places to go from here. For anyone who knows the game, I'm in the Cathedral Ward. I don't suppose that's really a spoiler because it's just 2 words, but I've not really journeyed too far in yet. I've kind of just begun that section and then sort of ran out of time the night I was playing it last. But oh man, it is just really good. It's amazing how quickly that fear factor that the game definitely had for me when I started playing it falls away, and your desire to just keep trying things, and I think even to experiment with how I'm playing and what, not so much any build stuff or character upgrades or anything like that yet because it's still very early doors, but just how to use different weapons and how to approach different fights and learning things like the parry technique and all that. Like, it feels like something, that a normal game would obviously signpost to you and tell you up front how all this stuff works and where you ought to be going and what you should be looking for. And how many games have you played where all the tutorial stuff just goes on for most of the game and you're still getting pop-ups 15 hours in saying this type of currency will allow you to do this type of thing. But with Bloodborne it's just,
not that game.
None of it is there. Absolutely nothing is there. I mean, even as much as I went into it knowing like the game tells you nothing, I mean, it really fucking tells you absolutely nothing, Mark. It tells you nothing at all. It doesn't tell you the controls. It doesn't tell you what any of the systems are. It just kind of sets you loose. And to me, and I guess I'm saying this for anyone who's thought about playing it and is maybe a bit put off by the type of game that it is, that was a big concern for me, was that I was just going to get frustrated and think I have no idea what's going on and I'm just going to have to read a load of guides and all that kind of extra non-game stuff to get to grips with it. But moment to moment you just start learning and you start trying things, and I think particularly once you realise how the death system works and kind of how you can treat that and how you can approach it so that the fear of losing your blood echoes, which is basically your currency, doesn't ruin the gameplay experience. Once you're there, which is kind of where I got to shortly after the first boss, it is just really incredible, and I can't wait to get further in. I've got miles and miles and miles to go, and I really do need a good long session, I think, in front of it, a good 4 or 5 hour stint to really make some headway. But so far, so very good, Mark.
Nice one, man. I am absolutely fucking delighted, frankly, that you are enjoying this as much as you are. I have wanted you to play this for a very long time. Oh, basically since I've played it, so probably about a year now. I've been like, you should absolutely play this immediately. It is so good. And I am very happy that you agree with me on that, because I thought it was so fantastic. And like you said, now that you've got to Cathedral Ward, the game does open up in quite a big way. I feel as if this is where you're really getting into it properly. Do you know what I mean? That bit that you just did there, Lewis, that was the intro. That was it, just making sure that you were good enough to progress. And now you've progressed, and now the game is really going to get going full swing, and good grief, it is so good.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even on that, I've heard so often that those first couple of boss fights are sort of skill checks to make sure that you sort of know how to play and what you're supposed to be doing, and I'm really encouraged by how I've found those fights to be. After, you know, the first time you approach each of them, it's really tough, but the second one in particular, I mean, are we doing spoilers for what is effectively a 6-year-old game?
I don't know, man. Like, I'm pretty sure that I mentioned Father Gascoigne when I was talking about the game, so feel free to mention Father Gascoigne.
The second boss fight, against Father Gascoigne, I was dreading, and the first time I played it was really tough, but I mean, it didn't take me that many goes altogether. Like, you can learn them, and you can learn what you're supposed to do, and you've got enough options to try different techniques if the one that you start with isn't working. So yeah, that side of it is the thing that is kind of most exciting to me right now, is that it feels really rich and deep in terms of its mechanics and systems, that it does allow experimentation and playfulness, even though it doesn't feel like a very playful game because it's so fucking heavy and dirty, and you know, there's bells tolling and creatures screaming at you the whole time.
Yeah, that's about par for the course, but I am very glad that you're enjoying this list, and I'm glad that you're enjoying those nuances of it as well. It's not just the surface level stuff, like it's all of it is fantastic. It's so good for me anyway. It's genuinely one of the best games ever made, in my opinion. I hope that you get to that level with it, frankly.
What about you, Mark? What have you been playing?
Well, Liz, as I mentioned last week, I had started playing the Nier Replicant remake. To be honest with you, I hadn't progressed too far in it, but I've got like a wee bit further now. Still don't have a goddamn clue what the fuck is happening story-wise. I now have a talking magical book that follows me around called Grimoire Vice, which I think might be one of the best names in a video game I have ever heard. It is fucking incredible. And we are now hunting down another magical talking book because if we destroy that, somehow we save our sister from an illness. And also the game opened in modern times, and then it went, oh, but 1412 years in the future, and then the game actually begins, but it looks like the Middle Ages, but we just told you it's the future. What? It's one of those, you know.
Okay, yeah.
But listen, what I was most interested in is that the combat is very, very, very similar to Nier Automata, and that is fantastic for me, I have to say. I don't honestly have too much to say about the game yet. Like I said, I feel as though I've really barely scratched the surface yet. And I feel as if I've just sort of got into the game proper. Like I now have, well, Grimoire Vice can do like attacks for you and stuff like that. And I feel as if I'm now like loaded and ready to take on the game properly, you know? So very much looking forward to getting stuck into it. Left a very positive impression so far as well, I would say.
Nice one. That's good to hear, because I mean, it'd be easy for Nier Automata to really stand out in the series and the others not to be so good, but it sounds like you're enjoying it. Very
much enjoying it, I have to say. Don't get me wrong, it would take a lot to top Nier Automata, I would have thought, but I mean, I'm open to it, Liz. I'm very, very interested to see where this game is going. But anyway, Liz, I think it's time for the news. Alright, Liz, news item number 1. Nvidia have leaked a whole host of games coming to PC, including, potentially, God of War. This was found in a data mine of Nvidia's GeForce Now servers by a developer called Igor July, and was subsequently compiled and published on GitHub by SteamDB creator Pavel Jindik, I think is how we're saying his second name. Some of the more interesting games that were included on this list, and it was a huge list. I mean, we'll link to it over on the show notes at PlayersToo.com, but there's hundreds, if not thousands, of games on this list. But some that were included were God of War, as previously mentioned, Demon's Souls, Ghost of Tsushima, Gran Turismo 7, Horizon Forbidden West, Ratchet & Clank, Returnal, Sackboy: A Big Adventure, and Uncharted Legacy of Thieves Collection. And we'll just put a pin in that Legacy of Thieves Collection just for a wee second. The list goes on and on and on, like Final Fantasy 16 is in there, Final Fantasy 7 Remake is in there, and then you get into some of the more weird stuff, I have to say. Kingdom Hearts 4, Half-Life 2 Remaster, then the GTA Trilogy Remaster was there. Interestingly, all as separate games, I have to say, not as like one collection. But then there was other stuff like the Mirror's Edge RTX Remaster, Batman Arkham Knight RTX Remaster, Bioshock RTX Remaster, and Bioshock 2022, which presumably is Bioshock 4, and then just a whole bunch of sequels for games that we already know, like Injustice 3, there was Mortal Kombat Next Gen, there was Tekken 8 loose, which is the first time I've heard mention of a new Tekken for God knows how long, and Gears 6, just as some examples of stuff here, do you know what I mean? Nvidia have subsequently released this statement regarding the leak.
Nvidia is aware of an unauthorized published game list with both released and or speculative titles used only for internal tracking and testing. Inclusion on the list is neither confirmation nor an announcement of any game. Nvidia took immediate action to remove access to the list. No confidential game builds or personal information were exposed.
So, while I think some of these games on this list probably are speculative, I mean, for example, most of the sequels, I mean, let's be honest here, you don't need a fucking crystal ball to know that there's going to be a new Mortal Kombat at some point in the future, do you know what I mean? But Lewis, on the PlayStation side in particular, that Uncharted Legacy of Thieves collection was only just announced before this leak became public. We'd never heard that name before, but it was on this list correctly. So I believe like some of this might be real to a certain extent. Also particularly interesting around God of War was that it was one of only a handful of these hundreds and hundreds of games, again, maybe over 1,000 games, that actually mentioned that it was coming to Steam specifically. So I suppose my question to you is just broad range. What do you think of this? How real do you think this is? How much do you think we should be paying attention to this list, if at all?
A couple of good questions there. You know, should we be paying attention to it? Is it real? I'm sort of willing to take Nvidia at face value here, that it is a list that combines both the real and the imagined, I suppose, like a list of the stuff that they know is coming and stuff that they think will come. As you say, there are games there that are, forgetting the PlayStation stuff for a wee second, there are games there that we absolutely know will be in the pipeline no matter what. Your next Mortal Kombat game, there will be
of course.
Any of that stuff.
Like, absolutely.
That tells me this is just a list of potentials. Although, why they need a list like that, I don't really know. Like, those lists are everywhere. Why do you need it written down somewhere that these games are...
My thing about this is, right, is that if you're going to speculate on games that might be coming in the future, like, there's some, like, weird ones in there, though, as well, I think. For example, there's, like, Human Fall Flat 2, which, like, might be a thing, but... Are you really speculating on a new Human Fall Flat game? That seems bizarre to me. That seems like you've got to be operating with at least some internal information, do you know what I mean, that the public isn't privy to. As well, these RTX remasters are very interesting to me because obviously Nvidia, very famous for making ray tracing just graphics cards in general, but obviously they make a lot of ray tracing graphics cards now. So all these RTX remasters, I'm now thinking, do you just know that because you are involved in that and people are trying to use your technology to make remasters of their old games with ray tracing technology in it? It's wee things like that I'm thinking about, and the stuff around PlayStation, I don't know, like a lot of it makes sense to me, obviously, because I think that dropping all these games basically on PC makes sense to me and should really make sense to PlayStation as well, you know? The
thing that makes me wary of it from the PlayStation sense is that it sounds basically like they're saying every PlayStation game is coming, including lots of fairly recent or impending PS5 exclusives. I mean, I totally think that it's right and will happen that Sony are going to put games onto PC, but you know, not Returnal anytime soon, not, you know, Horizon Forbidden West anytime soon.
Returnal to me feels a bit more speculative, to be honest. Horizon Forbidden West will be very, very interesting to see what they do with that. Again, I would think that is a bit more speculative. But things like God of War, Demon's Souls, Ghost of Tsushima, Gran Turismo 7, it does just say Ratchet and Clank as well, not Ratchet and Clank A Rift Apart, which makes me think that might be the 2016 version, which again would make a lot of sense. Obviously, Uncharted, we've already had confirmed that that's coming over, but the fact that they knew about that ahead of time, or at least it appears as though they could have known about that ahead of time, is interesting to me, do you know what I mean? So if they knew about that ahead of time, what else do they know?
Well, sure, but they knew about it ahead of time in such a way that they might have just been told a couple of days before the announcement or a couple of weeks ago because it was about to be announced. I think that's kind of where I'm drawing the line. Like, I think that there's probably quite a lot of...
To be honest with you, that is completely within the realm of possibility here. You know, that is completely a reasonable take, I have to say.
I basically imagine, as I say, it's some sort of mixing of the two things. Some stuff that they knew about, some that they're hoping will come, some that they are just predicting will come down the line. As I say, I mean, it's got everything there, like Sackboy's Big Adventure and stuff, right? Like, there's nothing to me in what Sony have been doing recently that says that they would put a game like that onto PC anytime soon, because they've seemed to be focusing on the big hitters that might tempt someone to buy a PlayStation, basically, right? You know, you put Uncharted and you put Horizon onto PC so that people think, well, I've got to buy a PS5 because I loved Horizon and Forbidden West is due soon, so I've got to get one, rather than just like anything on the catalogue. I mean, maybe they've just signals a change in attitude from Sony, which is fine, I think, you know?
Well, I think that since they got, I think it was 250% return on porting Horizon to PC, I think that since they saw that number, they thought, hey, do you know what we should do? We should port a lot more games to PC.
I mean, maybe so, and it makes total sense from a business perspective in that sense.
I really think that it does, and to be honest with you, I can see them accelerating that as well, and I think that buying like a porting specialist like Nixus is a statement of intent there.
Definitely.
Like whether or not all these games actually end up on PC, I think is quite unlikely, or at least within a reasonable time frame in which Nvidia would know about it. But it's interesting anyway. I think it's interesting. One other thing that I have to say that I found very interesting about this leak was that Dolphin Emulator was part of it. Now, most people probably don't know what Dolphin Emulator is, but it is an emulator for GameCube and Wii games, and it's probably the best one at that out there, and probably the most well-known one out there. And it is worth pointing out that New Super Mario Bros. Was also a game mentioned in this leak, and now that might make you think, oh well, it's obviously all bollocks then. It's rubbish because New Super Mario Bros. Is never going to come to PC, which, to be honest with you, it would not surprise me. In fact, I'd be more surprised if it came to PC than if it didn't come to PC. So I'm definitely not suggesting that you will be able to play Nintendo games through PC, through GeForce Now, anytime soon. However, I think that it's very interesting that a Mario game was there at all and that an emulator was there at all. There has been speculation around an Nvidia Nintendo partnership when it came to the Switch Pro, although that never came to fruition when the OLED Switch was announced. Like, they were supposed to be Nvidia chipsets as part of that, but there is a connection there. Also, and equally as interesting, I think, it could just be Nvidia looking at how their cloud streaming technology works with emulators, and if you could upload your own emulators and use their technology to run them. Now, that seems to me like something Nintendo would be on top of, like, right quick. But it's interesting. It's interesting all the same. Like, just the fact that there was a Nintendo game there at all, and that there was an emulator there at all, you know?
Yeah, I mean, a Nintendo game starts to push everything into the realms of, you know, impossibility.
Fantasy.
To me. Yeah. Just, you know, a list of games that someone there would love to come to Nvidia or come to PC, but is not likely to happen by any stretch. There's no contemplating for me that Nintendo would stomach an emulator with their games on a major system. It's just not going to happen, I don't think.
But the thing is that I don't know if Nvidia can skirt around it, because emulating is like a very legally grey area, and don't get me wrong, Nintendo are trying to come down very, very hard on that side of things. You know what I mean? They 100% are. But so far as I'm aware, like, emulating the system isn't actually illegal. So if GeForce Now were to say, hey, we've got all these emulators over here, what are you going to do with this? And then you illegally download your own ROMs, you can then use on their system. Like, I understand that is a legal fucking nightmare waiting to happen, but I'm just saying it's interesting that they have thought about that, you know?
I mean, definitely, and there could be options around that. There might be good and legal reasons to do some of that, but, you know, if there is some sort of connection between Nvidia and Nintendo already, I don't imagine it would survive them facilitating that. So
Perhaps not, that is true. Alright, loose news item number 2. Battlefield 2042 has been delayed nearly a month until November the 19th. EA have released this statement on the Battlefield Twitter account.
We've made the decision to shift the launch of Battlefield 2042. The game will now be released worldwide on November 19th, 2021. Building the next generation of Battlefield during a global pandemic has created unforeseen challenges for our development teams. Given the scale and scope of the game, we had hoped our teams would be back in our studios together as we move towards launch. With the ongoing conditions not allowing that to happen safely, and with all the hard work the teams are doing from home, we feel it is important to take the extra time to deliver on the vision of Battlefield 2042 for our players.
As ever, with delays like this, and Lewis, I'm sure you will agree with me, take as much time as you need. It is definitely better to get a good game late than a bad game early. You know, no question about that. Now, they have specifically said that it was COVID related, the fact that this delay is COVID related. And while it is actually only a relatively short delay in reality, I think it is indicative of like a lot of the second half of 2021 delays. You know what I mean? Dying Light 2, it was just announced, was delayed until February the 4th. Horizon Forbidden West has been delayed until February the 8th. Rainbow Six Extraction has been delayed until January. Destiny 2's next big expansion, The Witch Queen, has been delayed until February the 22nd. Gotham Knights, Hogwarts Legacy, and the Gollum game have all been pushed to next year, meaning that WB basically won't have released a major game this year or last year, and I would argue that their last major release was Mortal Kombat 11 back in April 2019, which is mad to think about. Even on smaller games, Lewis, like Prince of Persia remake has been delayed indefinitely. Sifu got delayed until February as well. We have heard nothing about Silksong or the Cuphead DLC for a very, very long time. Even games like Kenna and Deathloop, both of which are now out, and we'll talk about Kenna later on, both of which had been delayed this year. And while you might be thinking, oh, well, what's the big deal? Video games get delayed all the time. And that is true, basically. But it does feel as though every video game is getting delayed right now. Do you know what I mean? It's not just that some video games are getting delayed. It's like every game that I'm looking forward to has been delayed in some capacity, or it feels that way anyway. And honestly, I think that this might be about to get worse before it gets better in a lot of ways, because we were talking about that games might be delayed in 2020 because of the pandemic. Obviously, that was the height of it. That was when it was all happening, lockdowns were happening. But the games that were coming out then had already been in production for like such a long time that it was probably just polished. They were in like final stages before they were coming out. And while games like The Last of Us Part 2 were delayed slightly, and I think Ghost of Tsushima was delayed slightly as well, like it wasn't that big a deal, and it certainly wasn't en masse, or it didn't feel that way, certainly. Whereas this does, because I think that these games were a wee bit later in their production cycles and were more affected by the pandemic. And going forward, like I feel that for maybe like a couple of years, this is going to have a bit of a knock-on effect. For example, as I was saying to you just before we started your podcast, like if you were ramping up into major production of your video game, say in April or May last year, right at the height of the pandemic, right when things were starting to get shut down, there's no way you're on track for that game. Now, we will be able to maybe live in blissful ignorance of that fact because that game will not have been announced to us yet. But really, I think that this is going to be a continual impact on the industry for maybe a good couple of years still to go, really.
I think that's a certainty, to be honest, because, I mean, even to suggest otherwise would suggest that this is about to end, and it's not really about to end as much as the world might be starting to act a wee bit more normal. Like, there's every chance that studios... I mean, they're saying here that they've not been able to go back to the office, basically, in the lead up to this release, which obviously companies are still deciding it's not safe for their employees. So there's a lot of games that are still being worked on that are still in this same context that Battlefield has been delayed, and I don't think it's going to change drastically anytime soon. So I think you're right. Like, I think more stuff is going to be delayed. As you say, games have been delayed since time immemorial, since long before COVID was a problem, but it has been pretty profound this year. I mean, there's not been a hell of a lot of major game releases. Been a lot of good smaller games, and it can be that those smaller games... I always think back to like Into the Breach, which came out a few years ago, that was developed by two people living in different... I think one was in Europe and one was in America, and they were sort of trading off development. Like, one worked through the day and handed all the files off to the other person at night, and he worked through his working day. So smaller games can kind of do that. You can't do that with Battlefield, you know. You're just not going to be able to do that.
No, you absolutely can't.
And so
it
is that scale of game that is going to be particularly impacted, and that's why we've seen a lot of these major games pushed and pushed and pushed, and, you know, will continue to be. Sounds like Battlefield is on track to come out before the end of the year. Maybe there's a little bit of just, you know, they just want a couple of extra weeks polish there. Maybe they're looking at the other releases around them and thinking, well, we can comfortably move this and blame it on COVID, but, you know, why not if that is the case? But I totally agree. I think a lot of games that we were expecting to see, it seems like all of them are coming in February 2022 now, but I suspect some of those are going to move as well, you know.
Just getting in before the tax year ends, that's what they're doing. But I have to say, like, if a game says that it's coming out on X date in 2022, like, I would not be holding the developer to that date at all. Like, I really wouldn't. Even things like God of War, for example, like, I feel a bit more confident about that coming out in 2022 because of how much gameplay we've now seen thanks to the most recent PlayStation presentation. So I'm feeling a bit better about that, you know. However, things like Starfield, for example, or like Avowed or like Fable, you know what I mean? I didn't mean to pick on Xbox there, that's really not what I was trying to do, but I was just trying to think of games that were like coming soon that I was excited about. Like, we've not seen a lot about them. We don't even have a release date. So if you haven't seen a lot for these games, and I know that we are, specifically Starfield, like expecting that in 2022, and I cannot wait to play Starfield, so this is no fucking Xbox PlayStation bullshit. we've not seen a lot from that game yet, and at this point, due to COVID and due to the difficult working conditions and due to the fact that they are probably one of the games that was really ramping up their production in 2019 to try and hit that 2022 release window. Sorry, in 2020 trying to hit that 2022 release window. I think that they could be impacted, and I wouldn't be at all surprised if we didn't see that until the holidays 2023 rather than 2022 , you know?
Yeah, and if that's the case, then so be it, because the alternatives are putting the staff at risk or crunching or, you know, both of those
having
things.
Having a bad game or like all of them, or all of that. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, definitely not. Delay your game, make a good game. As I said, like, it's better to have a great game late than a bad game early. Like, who the fuck wants that? You know? Make the best game that you can. Keep everyone safe. That is by far the most important thing.
Absolutely.
Alright, list news item number 3. A confidentiality agreement submitted to the FCC in the US has revealed that Nintendo are planning the release of a new controller. Now, revealing the release of a new controller as part of a confidentiality agreement seems to be counteracting what a confidentiality agreement is, but here we are. The product is simply called the Game Controller, and Nintendo has put the confidentiality agreement in place for 180 days, which means that in sometime in the next 6 months, we are very likely going to find out what that is. Now, this coupled with the rumour that we talked about last week that the Nintendo Switch Online service is seemingly going to start including Game Boy games, and as part of a data mine, we also know that there is other emulators within the Nintendo Switch Online service. And we were speculating that there's a good chance that one of them might be an N64 emulator. And one Lewis Camley then speculated on top of that we could see a new peripheral, a new controller for the N64 in the similar way that we saw for the NES and the SNES controllers. And now we have this confidentiality agreement, and all those things seem to be adding up quite nicely, I would say. Now, I don't think that there is much need for a new controller around Game Boy games, personally. But if they were going to release N64 games, I think that there's a huge need for a controller, or it would make a hell of a lot of sense on Nintendo's part to release a new controller for that. And you were just telling me, Lewis, that literally as we started recording this podcast, that VGC have released another article that suggests that we might not have to wait 6 months at all, and in actual fact we might only have to wait till the end of the week to find out what this controller is.
Yeah, it does seem that way. Yeah, new filings have appeared on the FCC website that state that the quotes short-term confidential information will be made available by this Friday, September 24th, and it seems like the internet has taken that to suggest that a Nintendo Switch Direct will happen this week, which, I mean, as we sit here right now, essentially would have to be on Thursday, and that does kind of track.
They usually are on Thursday as well, yeah. Just to fuck us over, Nintendo.
I think as well, and I might be wrong, I haven't checked this, but I think that Nintendo Switch Online launched around this date in whatever year it was, right? It was like a September launch, I believe.
Yeah, I think that tracks. Yeah, I think it must have been round about that sort of time anyway, yes. Yeah,
so, you know, and that's the perfect way to try and increase subscribers if you've got something big to announce like this. So, yeah, something about all of this smells like the truth to me. Something's coming.
Smells like the truth. That Nvidia stuff, fuck that smells like shit. This smells like the truth. Yeah, I mean, you must be pretty pleased with yourself. You basically called this. I mean,
the rumours around the N64 coming, you know, have floated around for a while in terms of Switch Online. Sure. But yeah, I mean, I don't know tons about Nintendo 64, but the one thing that stands out in my head is like it has a different controller from basically everything else, and
it really does.
Without knowing the ins and outs, like I wouldn't have been sure how an N64 game could port to modern controls. Although, having said that, you know, you've played Mario 64 on the Switch.
Yeah, Mario 64. Do you know what I mean? They've done a totally fine job with that. The controls felt relatively natural, well, as natural as controllers that old can feel on like just a standard button layout. But will it feel better on the controller that it's designed for? Almost certainly. Do you know what I mean? So I feel that this peripheral is almost more necessary than like the SNES and the NES ones, because they are basically like a standard button layout, whereas the N64 controller is a mad bastard, you know what I mean, when it comes to controllers.
Well, and I guess in that sense, if they are adding other N64 games to Switch Online, like they're not going to put the same effort that they put in port in Mario 64, the work that they put into that to get the controls up to scratch. They're not going to do that for every single just like essentially emulated game they fire up on a Nintendo Switch Online, so you probably do need a new peripheral to do all that. And yeah, this seems to track, but it does mean probably that we're getting this announced before Game Boy, I guess.
Well, I don't know. I imagine that they would be announced in tandem, to be honest with you. Imagine.
Oh, really?
You'd be getting
Yeah,
your Game Boy games, you would be getting your Game Boy Color games, and you'd be getting your N64 games like all at once. I would have thought, considering the rumours around Game Boy games were like very strong and was like corroborated by, I think, Eurogamer and VGC and people like that. So I feel very strongly that they are coming, and with this announcement of a new controller, I do not believe that controller will be in any way related to Game Boy, and I can only think that it will be the N64. So to me, it makes sense for them to be launched in tandem, personally.
Great, I think that would be really exciting.
Absolutely, man, absolutely. Cannot wait. Alright, list news item number 4. Insomniac's upcoming Wolverine game has been confirmed by creative director Brian Horton to be, quotes, full-sized and have a, quotes, mature tone. Although he did not say, it has to be pointed out, it would be M-rated. There has been a bit of speculation around the Wolverine game and whether or not it would be M-rated because Disney. But undoubtedly, Insomniac and PlayStation will be under a lot of pressure to make this game as appealing to the widest audience possible. And obviously there is speculation about what implications that would have on the actual game. Disney have obviously dabbled in R-rated superhero movies with Deadpool and Logan, both of which are conveniently in the X-Men universe list, which is quite nice for a Wolverine game, I have to say. But that being said, when it comes to Marvel and Disney, they are very much the exception and not the rule. But having said that, it does seem as though if Disney are going to go and target a mature audience with a superhero movie of some sort, they seem to like to do that with the X-Men universe, it appears anyway. I don't know, like I feel as though maybe Insomniac have bought a bit of goodwill with Disney with how successful the Spider-Man games have been so far, but I don't know, what is your take on all this? Like, would you be disappointed if Insomniac released a Wolverine game and it wasn't M-rated? Or 18 as it would be here in the UK, of course.
I mean, I don't want to say I'd be disappointed because like I don't want to judge a game just based on its ESRB rating, but I do think it would be quite hard to do a good Wolverine game, a good modern Wolverine game, and not have it be a bit more mature in tone than even the Spider-Man games are. You know, that's what the character is. I mean, if
absolutely, and the trailer was aiming at that
absolutely,
as well. Like, do you know what I mean? It was trying to give that more mature tone.
Yeah, and I just don't think, you know, you can't have it be sort of cartoonish violence that doesn't, you know, stack up with that character. I think if it was an X-Men game, you could lean backwards and have it be slightly more child-friendly. But if you're telling a Wolverine story, you know, you think about Logan itself, like that is, you know, a pretty full-on violent movie, and that's kind of what we expect from that character. I don't think you need to keep all your superhero characters in that teenage friendly zone. It just doesn't have to be that way, and games just work quite differently to films as well, because people are, I mean, let's be honest, kids are playing 18 rated games when they're not 18. Obviously kids are seeing 18 rated movies before they're 18, but the regulation in terms of going to the cinema and seeing that is just not there in the same way in games. So you don't have to part of the reason that studios try and keep films to PG-13 or whatever it is these days is to sell as many tickets as possible. But this isn't, I mean, GTA 5 shows you that it's not going to affect the number of sales you get if your game is an 18 rated game. So I think that they would be wise to do it, lean into it, make it that type of game. You'll get the sales and you'll get the critical plaudits for it, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, critically, I think that going M-rated or 18 here in the UK is definitely where the game has to be if they are looking for it to be a critical success. And let's face it, PlayStation aim for that quite a lot. Let's be honest, they aim to be getting lots of Game of the Year awards. They aim to be in the zeitgeist in that way quite a lot. Do you know what I mean? So that tracks for PlayStation. I don't necessarily think that tracks for Disney, which is an interesting thing, but I'm not sure if maybe PlayStation and Insomniac have again bought a bit of goodwill with Disney because of how well the Spider-Man stuff has went, that they've said, okay, you can do Wolverine, it can be M-rated, we'll see how we get on, sort of thing, you know. But again, for me, Insomniac don't miss. So if they are allowed to make an M-rated Wolverine game, I'm sure it'll be fantastic. And you heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. Lewis Camley, Wolverine will be as big as GTA 5.
Yeah, I'm saying exactly that.
Anyway, let's finishing off as we always do with a couple of shout Shutouts. Shutout number 1, Kenna Bridge of Spirits, has come out this week, and the reviews do seem to be pretty good indeed. Currently sitting with an 84 on Metacritic for the PS5. Worth pointing out that there was a bit of weirdness around the review codes for this game. It seems that some outlets got the review codes like pretty late, and some presumably smaller outlets didn't get any at all. There are 24 reviews on the PS5, which is a relatively good sample size on Metacritic anyway for a game of this caliber, but there are only 2 reviews on PC, which isn't usual, I would say. So I'm not entirely sure what happened with all that, but regardless, it does seem as though it is a good game. It does seem to have landed well, and Lewis, I am very much looking forward to playing it.
Good stuff, yeah. It was really gratifying to see good reviews come out for this, because I think we were both a little bit wary of the review situation. It felt like there was not much clarity about who was getting codes and when reviews were dropping. I mean, basically reviews dropped sort of at midnight our time last night, like as the game is launching, basically, which is far from ideal. I hope that that's just some
PlayStation bullshit.
Some PlayStation bullshit,
PlayStation
or potentially,
bullshit,
just some kind of protecting the story or protecting the length of the game or something like that. Who knows? It's not ideal. Customers should be told well in advance what the product they're going to buy is like, but it seems like people are happy with it. I guess we'll see in the next few days if audiences feel the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I cannot wait to play this again. I think that the games look spectacular for a long time, so glad to see that at least the first wave of critics think that it's quite good. Alright, let's shout out number 2. Lost Judgment has also come out this week. This is the sequel to Judgment 2019, which was originally a spin-off of the Yakuza series. It is currently sitting with an 84 on PS5 and an 82 on Series X. It does seem to have reviewed just as well as the original, if not slightly better. I did see a few criticisms that the overall story may not be quite as good as the original, but otherwise it does seem to be a very good game. I would not let that put you off playing it at all if you are a fan. And if you're a fan, this definitely seems to be something that you want to go after, because it does just seem like more Judgment, you know. I've never really been into the Yakuza series, but honestly, I like this spin-off. I actually think that I'm probably more likely to play one of the Judgment games than I am ever to play one of the Yakuza games. But yeah, I'm really glad to see this series do well. I know it's beloved by a lot of people. It seems like a great series. It's just not something that I am massively into, you know?
Yep, another good one for the fans of the series. Who knows if we'll get some more, but it seems like critics are enjoying it. It seems like players are going to enjoy it, and yeah, great stuff. I think I'm kind of in the same camp as you. I'm probably more likely to play this than Yakuza, because I'm kind of more interested in that detective-y side of things than gangster stuff.
Yeah, I agree, man. It's just such a cool spin-off as well from the series. Like, I love the direction.
Just
it's really
smart
cool.
idea. Yeah.
Definitely. Alright, let's shout out number 3, and I am absolutely delighted to tell you that things have got even worse for the leadership of Activision Blizzard list, following the accusation of sexual misconduct and discrimination at Activision Blizzard. Back in July, ladies and gentlemen, you may remember that the California Department of Fair Employment and Housing filed a lawsuit against Activision Blizzard, making the aforementioned allegations. Activision Blizzard subsequently responded to that by attacking the DFEH, and subsequently to that, the employees then revolted because that response was frankly disgusting, prompting the employees of Activision Blizzard to walk out. On the back of that, Activision Blizzard then hired a union-busting lawyer to sort things out, which the employees were also less than chuffed with, as you can imagine. Then, amazingly, twists and turns all over the place, Liz, then another lawsuit was filed against Activision Blizzard, but this time by their own investors, which is just just absolutely beautiful.
That was a chef's kiss for anyone who can't see Mark right now.
That was a chef's kiss. Basically accusing the board of lying to them, which they absolutely fucking did. But now things are getting even worse still for the board of Activision Blizzard, as the US Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, are now launching a wide-range investigation into Activision Blizzard, but in part because of their response to the sexual misconduct and discrimination allegations. They have also requested documents, including minutes from board meetings, to review how the top execs handled the situation. And just to be absolutely clear, what that means is that Activision Blizzard are now being investigated by a federal agency. It's no longer at a California state level. This is now at a federal US government level. And I have watched enough American TV lists to know that you do not fuck with the feds. CEO and head Activision scumbag Bobby Kotick is also being subpoenaed by the SEC, which means that he will be getting questioned and will therefore have to defend himself in court, which will just be, again, chef's kiss again, Lewis. Mwah. Fucking beautiful, that. Hopefully this results in at least a massive fine for a man who is far too fucking rich and certainly doesn't deserve it, frankly. Or with any luck, they all go to jail. The whole board who have enabled this horrendous culture and then try to defend it end up in jail, because that is absolutely what they fucking deserve. Unfortunately, I believe that these people have far too much money for that, and I don't think that the world is that just. But I think that this is good, and I'm glad that they are being investigated, and I feel so bad for the actual individual employees of Activision Blizzard that they have to even be part of this fucking conversation, you know, because I'm sure that they are just awesome game developers who are trying to make an awesome game but constantly have to fight against this shower of shit.
Yeah, definitely a shout out to those guys, the ordinary worker at Activision Blizzard, who are both suffering this and just dealing with it and having to go to work and sort of survive in these circumstances. But yeah, for the rest of them, for Bobby Kotick, for the whole process, like, you know, just fuck them, just fuck the whole thing.
Absolutely,
throw the book at them. Its culture needs to change drastically. Let's hope that the mountain pressure will do that. I think their legal officer has stepped down tonight as well, so like there's shifts happening over there, but more to come, hopefully.
Yeah, see if that whole boardroom gets sacked. What a fucking shame that would be. Anyway, let's moving on to shout out number 4, and we don't end on depressing stuff anymore. So something which is pretty awesome, hopefully. Halo Infinite's latest multiplayer preview will be available on September the 24th, which will be the day after this podcast comes out. So hopefully you have enough time to sign up for that if you want to play, and it will run until the 26th. If you didn't manage to sign up on time, there is also a tech preview coming on September the 30th, which will run until October the 3rd, which will focus on quote-unquote full-blown multiplayer. The first one will focus on 4v4 arena battles, and the second one will focus on 12v12 big team battles. I believe the first tech preview that we've already had, which I think was back in June or July or something like that, you were only allowed to fight bots, but I think that this one is more like proper multiplayer, for lack of a better term here, and you will be playing against other gamers. I'm excited to see what actually comes out of this. While I think that the first impressions from the original tech preview were pretty positive, it definitely wasn't without its bugs, so hopefully 343 have dealt with a lot of that, I've ironed a lot of that stuff out now, and it's a lot more smooth experience, basically, and something that fans can get really excited about, you know?
Yeah, time for people to jump into this. I really hope it does pan out and that it lives up to people's expectations. It'll be pretty devastating for all involved, for Xbox, if it doesn't. But signs are good. I think we're looking forward to a pretty big Halo game this winter, and let's hope some people jump into this and get a good experience from it.
Yeah, definitely. You do get a bit of a too big to fail vibe from Halo these days, I do have to say. But I mean, signs are positive. The delay was definitely a good thing. I think we can all say that now. Yeah, hopefully it's great, and hopefully we get some good reports from these tech demos. But Lewis, I think it is now time for a beer, and then we will be back with Topic of the Week. And we are back for Topic of the Week. Topic of the Week this week is the acquisition strategies of Xbox and PlayStation, Lewis. And this is obviously off the back of rumours that Xbox could be making another Bethesda-sized acquisition, e.g. multiple billions of dollars. So yeah, very interesting, Lewis.
Yeah, it is indeed. Yeah, this is a rumour that's been circling around on gaming Twitter mostly, that I've seen it in the past few days. I don't think any major outlets are reporting it yet, which doesn't mean that it's not true, but maybe just means that people don't have the evidence yet to really kind of back it.
Yeah, I think that there are definitely been articles out there. I'm not saying that it's necessarily your IGN, your Kotaku, or whatever, but I mean, there have been definitely articles suggesting that these rumours are more than speculation, you know?
And I think it was kind of partly based on the Twitter interactions of some Xbox employees and stuff as well, kind of saying things like, you know, that meeting we've just had, and then using GIFs that would suggest, like, Jesus Christ, something big is happening. And so obviously people are reaching from that to say that a major acquisition of the scale of the Bethesda purchase could be on the card. So I guess we touched a little bit last week, Mark, on some of the more recent studio purchases of PlayStation and kind of how the two compare. And I guess we're just kind of diving into that a bit more deeply today as well, particularly with the background context of this potential deal, which, you know, there's every chance that by the time we come to do the show next week will be a real thing, and we'll actually be able to talk about it in detail at that point. But starting off, these rumours, do you think they're true? And if so, any sort of notion of who Xbox might have in the crosshairs?
Well, first off, do I think that they are true? I think that it is possible that they are true. It wouldn't necessarily surprise me if they are true. However, I think that there is next to no evidence to tell me that this is a true thing. When major news outlets like, I don't know, your Eurogamer, Game Informer, IGN start corroborating this stuff, that's when we would normally talk about it, and that is why that wasn't a news item, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, because it was basically corroborated by no one. However, if this were a real thing, it wouldn't surprise me, and it wouldn't surprise me specifically if it were Sega. Because in this generation, Xbox have put an emphasis, although we've probably not seen a lot of it because we are here in the West, but I think trying to crack East Asia, specifically Japan, for Xbox has been a long-term goal for a long time, frankly, and they've never really quite managed it. But if they can get in with a big Japanese publisher, someone like Sega, someone who's an institution over there, I mean, got to be roundabout, you know? Suddenly you have also Atlas under your control as well if you buy Sega, and I think that if it were going to be someone of the size of Bethesda, and I'm not even suggesting that Sega are the size of Bethesda, but maybe in name only these days, to be honest, but I think that makes a lot of sense for Xbox, and in reality probably for Sega as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, it would definitely make sense for Sega. They're not the company that they once were, and I think you're right there in that what Sega brings almost is cultural capital and sort of name brand recognition,
totally,
more
100%,
than actual games.
Absolutely, 100%. But having said that, obviously the Yakuza franchise that we just spoke about and all its spin-offs are doing absolutely great. Like, Sega was really in a bad place for like a long time and have really brought it around. Atlas as well, like they do all the Persona and Shin Megami Tensei stuff, which again here is only starting to get like a bit of recognition, but is huge in Japan, like absolutely massive in Japan. So that would be a huge deal for a lot of people over there, you know, and almost certainly would boost Xbox sales in Japan. So for me, that makes a bit of sense. I do have to say that when we were talking just in the break there, and after I had mentioned that WB hadn't released a game in a long time, and the fact that they were up for sale relatively really recently, you brought up that maybe they were a good candidate, and actually, yeah, they make a lot of sense as well, don't they?
Definitely. I mean, there was rumours before about WB games being up for sale, obviously, and I think that, you know, what we were told after that was that hadn't gone anywhere and that it had been taken off sale, but that is the kind of purchase that would, I think, turn heads, maybe even more so than Bethesda did, because even if you might be thinking, well, Bethesda's a bigger company or bigger gaming institution than WB Games is, when you look at the IP that they hold, that is pretty substantial. So yeah, those are the kind of ones that I was thinking about. Obviously, the rumour mill has touched on everything from Take-Two to EA to Ubisoft to...
I don't think that the three of them are particularly likely. I do have to throw that out there.
But just on this deal then, if this were to be true, the Bethesda deal was really exciting, but obviously really provocative as well, and led to a lot of kind of consternation in the industry. Do you think another major buy like this would be a good thing or a bad thing?
For the games industry at large, you mean?
Well, I mean, I guess it's going to be good for Xbox. So, yeah.
It's going to be good for Xbox. It's going to be good for Xbox fans. Is it going to be good for the games industry as a whole? Like, no, because I think consolidation is, generally speaking, bad for the wider industry. Do I think that it's necessarily getting to problem stages, which I think it is getting to in Hollywood? No, I also don't think that it's that either. But, I mean, if it were someone like WB, like Sega, I mean, that would be groundbreaking. That would be absolutely enormous, you know what I mean? And it would change the face of gaming in the same way that the Bethesda purchase did, you know what I mean? Suddenly, on the console side of things, some of the biggest titles in gaming are no longer available to me as a PlayStation gamer, as primarily a PlayStation gamer, on my preferred console. They've just gone overnight, you know what I mean? So it would be a huge thing. And again, particularly if they are trying to crack that Asian market, particularly the Japanese market, I think that Sega makes a lot of sense for that, and I think that, quite frankly, a lot of Japanese people would be pissed off if an American company bought Sega, but
Yeah, I mean, it could backfire in that sense. To be totally honest, some people might not make that jump and stick with PlayStation. But thinking about PlayStation as well, obviously last week we were talking about their purchase of Firesprite. I think since, and you pointed this out to me off air actually, that since the Bethesda deal, PlayStation have been actually stepping up a bit, and they've bought Housemarque most notably. They've also bought Nix's, which is the kind of PC port studio that we talked about very briefly earlier. But they've also had this quite interesting kind of investment strategy where they've put money into companies like Jade Raymond's Haven, Deviation Games, Firewall Studios from some of the ex-Bungie staff. Well, as we were saying last week, it feels much more that PlayStation, rather than going and buying the biggest player in town, they're kind of making smaller investments on kind of innovative younger studios or some previously smaller studios. What's going on there? Is this just Sony living within its means? Have they got a bigger strategy behind this, do you think?
I think that it is almost both. Like, for example, I don't think that PlayStation have the money that Xbox do just to go and buy Bethesda for 7.5 billion. I simply don't think that they have that sort of money. Not as a wider company, not in terms of like the value of Sony or anything like that, but in terms of money that they are just willing to dump on something. Sony is an enormous, huge company. They're not even on the same ballpark as Microsoft, though, is working on completely different levels. So I think that they are living within their means a little bit, but at the same time, I also don't think that they have to make these moves. And I think that Microsoft may feel, because of how the last generation went, that they do feel as if they do have to make these sort of moves. You know what I mean? As we were saying last week, it felt as though a lot of Xbox IP was sort of waning a little bit. And again, I am specifically thinking about Gears of War there, which was at one time an absolutely colossal franchise, but is subsequently sort of maybe waning in popularity a bit, waning in people's interest. Halo, obviously, still the daddy, and they're obviously trying to bring back a lot of historic IP that people like and want to see back, thinking specifically of Perfect Dark and thinking specifically of Fable as well, which I think is a great strategy for them. But I think that they felt as if they had to make things happen like right now, and I don't know any other way to do that than to buy a publisher that owns some of the most popular and prevalent IP in video games history. I think that was a colossal buy by them, but at the same time, I don't think that PlayStation had to make a move like that. To use your football analogy from last week, Lewis, I'm actually going to compare these situations to the two Manchester football clubs.
Okay.
I think that,
we'll go along with this.
I think that right now, PlayStation are, whatever numbers you look at, PlayStation are sort of leading the pack here, let's be honest. They have some of the biggest IP in all of video games right now. I don't think that they feel as though they had to make massive moves to continue to be in the position that they are. What they are more interested in is finding the next top player, not buying the top players right now. So they are your Manchester City, Lewis, if you will. However, Xbox felt as though, actually, we've fallen back a little bit here. Thinking of the last generation, not really this generation, thinking of the last generation, we've fallen back a little bit here from our 360 heyday, you know what I mean? So we feel as if we do have to go out and buy a Cristiano Ronaldo to get ourselves back up into that echelon, you know what I mean? And to be fair to them, it's going to fucking work. Like, it definitely is. Like, Fallout, Starfield, Elder Scrolls, Doom. People are going to buy Xboxes for those games. I'm going to buy an Xbox for those games, you know what I mean? It's definitely going to work. So I feel as though they're trying to accomplish different things, but Xbox is trying to find, who's our next Naughty Dog? Who's our next Insomniac games? Whereas Xbox are like, no, we need our Naughty Dog. Outside of 343 and the Coalition and people like that, like, who is our new Naughty Dog? Do you know what I mean? And I feel like they felt like they didn't have time to wait on that. They felt as if they needed that now. They needed their Naughty Dog, their Insomniac, their Santa Monica Studios. They needed those sorts of IP now, whereas PlayStation are looking for the next iteration of those sort of studios, you know? I hope that made sense, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, if you don't know who Cristiano Ronaldo is, none of it made any sense.
He's a footballer. He's quite good.
I think that's kind of a spot-on comparison. I think Ronaldo's a particularly interesting comparison to make because he also brings a lot of negativity with him, and so did that Bethesda deal. So that there's quite a lot of crossover there. But yeah, I think that you're broadly right about all of that, and I like the idea that PlayStation is taking this kind of slower approach to, not to really labour our football metaphor here, but they're developing the youth, right? They're bringing through new blood. They're giving them some game time. They're trying different things.
I mean, not even necessarily new blood. I mean, like, Jade Raymond is like an industry veteran. Like, the guys at Deviation Games are ex-Treyarch. The guys at Firewalk are ex-Bungie. Do you know what I mean? Like, these guys have been around the block, but at the same time, they're not household names like Obsidian and Double Fine and Bethesda,
Yeah, absolutely that. They've got promise, they've got heaps and heaps and heaps of potential because we know that they can make good games. They're in new configurations and they just need this bit of support, and that's kind of what PlayStation's doing. And I guess like the key question to me behind all of this really is like which, and I don't even want to, because I'm not very interested in console war bullshit, so I'm not going to ask like which of these is better or which is going to win necessarily, because I don't even think, how do you compare that really? But which of these is the most sustainable, do you think? I mean, and I say that because Microsoft could continue to do a Bethesda style purchase every couple of years really without touching the sides, I suspect. PlayStation, they can keep putting their money into these wee pots, but they'll ultimately need something to come good. And like, do you think, I mean, are Housemarque going to become that? Who else are they going to be able to buy? I mean, other than Bluepoint, there's kind of not a lot of rumours about where PlayStation can go next, but I do think that this strategy of kind of putting the money in lots of different houses and seeing which bloom and which need a bit more work and what they can then bring into PlayStation Studios is a fascinating strategy and feels sustainable in a way that doing a Bethesda style purchase every year might not be. But ultimately, Xbox can buy the field. You know what I mean? They can just buy everything up.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly can. Honestly, I am not even remotely interested in getting into console wars bullshit, nor am I particularly interested in trying to compare these strategies, if I'm totally honest with you, because they are both trying to achieve different things. And I think that hopefully, I mean, PlayStation are effectively playing the long game with a few of these studios, you know what I mean? So it is yet to be determined how PlayStation's strategy will pan out. But in terms of Xbox, I mean, yes, it has categorically worked. Like, they now have some of the biggest IP in the world.
Yeah, but I don't know if we can say it's worked yet, though, because they have to release good games for the strategy to pay off, and they haven't done it yet, That's the one caveat, I think, in that strategy.
Well, that is true, and all the games that have come out so far from the Bethesda side have been on PlayStation. And
very true.
They have been developed prior to the purchase as well, so it'll be interesting to see, for example, Starfield, which I know would have had a lot of development before the Xbox purchase, but there's no way that they're not going to have a hand in that, I wouldn't have thought. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes. But I mean, Bethesda are more than capable of making great games, some of the best games in the world. Like, Bethesda are capable of making the best game of that year, and I'm sure that the awards will show that time and time again. Do you know what I mean? So I don't have any doubt that this is going to work. Similarly with like Obsidian and Ninja Theory and Double Fine and even the other ones like Compulsion Games, like I truly feel that with the support of Xbox, they can make standout games. Like, I actually think that Xbox's acquisitions have been fantastic. Like, they've been absolutely brilliant. If I were them, those are the sorts of studios that I would have wanted to have bought. And if I had 7.5 billion to go and spend, I could probably do worse than buying Bethesda, if I'm totally honest. But yeah, it's different strategies. It definitely is different strategies. Again, I think that Xbox have made a lot of those purchases to kind of catch up to PlayStation to an extent, again, coming off of the last generation where PlayStation were so dominant for so long. But all of this obviously combined with Games Pass has like really bolstered Xbox, and I really think that in the long run in this generation you will see the PlayStation Xbox gap sizably shrink, and it will be due to a lot of people buying two consoles rather than just being content with one. And I think that a lot of the reason why someone would be so keen to buy two consoles is because of a lot of the games that would come out of these studios that we've already mentioned,
Yeah, I think that's pretty spot on, to be honest. I mean, if anything is going to convince people to jump, not even jump from one to the other, but to supplement their first choice console with the other, like that Bethesda deal is going to do that for a lot of people because of the types of games and the IP that you mentioned. I think that there is still some proving to be done by some of the other studios that Xbox have bought, and to a certain extent by Bethesda, because if Starfield ends up being another Fallout 76, we're not talking about a huge success anymore, I don't think that's going to happen for a second. I'm not doubting that.
No.
And obviously obviously, the PlayStation Studios, they're smaller. We've still got a lot to see from them. Housemarque, they could be the future. They might not be, but I think that's, PlayStation are spread betting and Xbox have put the mortgage on
Bethesda.
Yeah.
But they also haven't as well. Like, they do have a lot of other studios, that are fantastic. Like Ninja Theory, Obsidian, Playground Games, Double Fine alone, I think is a fantastic slate.
I mean, like Ninja Theory and Obsidian, particularly for me, are the ace in the hole there, and could be a big part of the turnaround for Xbox. But yeah, ultimately, this is going to lead to both consoles, both platforms having a ton of great games, and that's really exciting. But I guess, if another big acquisition does get announced in the next few weeks, everyone should bear in mind that it does not mean that it's the end for PlayStation. It does not mean that there won't still be great games on PlayStation, and nor does it mean that Xbox have conquered all. This is an evolving thing, and we're going to see lots of different types of purchases and different types of strategies for growth from both platforms, and that is really, really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And ultimately, I think that both fans will probably be pretty happy. And then, to be honest with you, like, as I said, like, PlayStation's strategy is yet to be determined how successful that will be, because it will live and die on the success of these games. But I think that PlayStation have been pretty damn good with their acquisitions up to this point, so I have no reason to doubt them here, and I think that they've backed some strong teams, I will say that much. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll have to call it a day there. I'd like to remind everyone that you can find PlayersToo on all the social media. That's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, the lot. You can also find our written content over at playerstoo.com. That's PLAYERSTOO.com. And if you could take 5 seconds to give us 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts, that really, really, really helps us out. There's a huge amount for the exposure of the show. And while you're over there, if you could leave us a little review as well, again, that just helps us out even more. I know I say this twice a week, every single week, but it does not become less important on a weekly basis. Thank you to anyone that's already done that for us. You're an absolute legend to us. I'd like to remind everyone as well that our play-along game for this month is Little Nightmares, which I've yet to start but will definitely be happening this week. I'm really looking forward to playing it, actually. I'm really looking forward to playing both Little Nightmares games back to back. Specifically the last one that I've been looking forward to playing for a long time, and I think that the tie-in round about Halloween, I suppose, will make it quite cool as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. I guess for me, though, now that I'm in the midst of Bloodborne, I could probably use a couple of games that weren't also kind of creepy and spooky in the way that Bloodborne is. But yeah, I'm really excited to get playing these as well. I think they're going to offer quite a nice, although again still spooky, break from what I'm playing most of the time.
Yeah, I'm not sure they'll be too similar to Bloodborne. I think you'll be alright, man. I think you'll be alright, dude. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, we will see you next week.
Thanks.